Dear listeners, I ask you to listen to the story until the very end and be sure to write a review about what you liked and what needs to be changed to make it more interesting for you to listen to my stories.
The Tenant. I'm not the superstitious type. Never believed in ghosts, or spirits, or any of that nonsense. But there are nights when something happens that makes you question the sanity of everything you thought you knew. You start to wonder whether the world is what it seems. My apartment is a tiny one, barely big enough for a guy like me, and the kitchen is nothing more than a cramped little nook in the corner. But it's mine. I've lived here for almost 2 years now, and for the most part, it's been the perfect place for me to keep to myself. At least, that's what I thought. It started subtly enough. I'd be watching TV, or reading a book in my living room, and I'd hear it. The sounds. They were soft at first, like the faint clink of something being moved in the kitchen. I tried to brush it off, of course. It was probably just my imagination, or the building settling. Old buildings make noise, right? They creak and groan with every shift of the wind or every change in the temperature. That's what I told myself. That's what I needed to tell myself. But then it got harder to ignore. It wasn't just a random clink anymore. The sounds grew more distinct, more deliberate. Pots, cups, maybe a spoon or two. Things moving, scraping against the counter, shifting in ways that felt too precise. Too purposeful. And it always happened around the same time. Midnight. Like a clock ticking away, marking the moment when whatever it was that lurked in my kitchen decided to make itself known. I'd get up, walk over to the kitchen, flick the light on, and find everything in its place. But I swear to you, it wasn't always that way when I walked back into the living room. One night, I decided to sit up and wait. I wanted to catch whatever it was in the act. Maybe I'd just forgotten something in the kitchen, or maybe the building really was creaking again. But I had to know. I set a timer on my phone, switched off the lights, and lay back on the couch, pretending to sleep. The clock ticked past midnight. At first, nothing. Just the quiet hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. Then, a sound. A faint scraping noise, like a glass being pushed across the counter. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. I didn't move. It happened again. Clink. Scrape. This time, it was more pronounced, more deliberate. I could almost picture it, a glass slowly shifting across the kitchen counter. And then, without warning, a loud thud. Something heavy dropped. My breath caught in my throat. I waited. The sounds stopped as quickly as they had started, and for a long moment, I just lay there, trying to convince myself that it was nothing. But something about it felt wrong. More wrong than I was willing to admit. The next day, I checked the kitchen thoroughly. No broken glass, no misplaced pots. Everything was as it should be. The next night, I was determined to get to the bottom of it. I had the kitchen under surveillance now. A small camera I'd borrowed from work, positioned just above the sink. I made sure it was connected to my phone, and set it to record whenever motion was detected. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I had to know. Midnight came. I was already awake, lying there in the dark, trying not to make a sound. And there it was again, a soft scrape. A clink. My heartbeat quickened as I reached for my phone and pulled up the footage. I wish I hadn't. The camera caught the movement in the kitchen. But it wasn't the pots or cups moving by themselves. No. Something else was happening. Something someone was doing. A figure, thin and gaunt, began to crawl out from the ventilation shaft. I stared at the screen. My hand trembled, and I almost dropped the phone. It was a person. At least, it looked like one. Its body was unnaturally thin, twisted in ways that made my stomach churn just watching it. The figure crept across the floor, its limbs jerking in strange, unsettling angles, as it moved with unnerving precision. It was the kind of thing that makes you doubt your own eyes. But there it was, on the screen, clear as day. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just confront it. whatever that thing was, it wasn't normal. It wasn't human. But what could I do? Call the cops? Tell them there was a skinny ghost crawling out of my vents at night? They'd throw me in a padded room, no doubt. But I wasn't crazy. That thing, whatever it was, had been in my kitchen, moving around every night, living in my space, sharing it with me without me even knowing. I wish I could say I did something. I wish I could say I had the courage to act. But I didn't. I just lay there, staring at the screen, as the figure crawled back into the ventilation shaft, disappearing into the darkness. It was only when I got up the next morning to make breakfast that I found the note. It was wedged behind the kitchen sink, stuffed in the small cupboard above the faucet. I reached up and pulled it out, my fingers shaking. The handwriting was crude, hurried, as if written in a panic. "It's too small for both of us. I need more room." That's all it said. And that's when I realized it wasn't just me in this apartment. There was someone, or something, else. Something that had been there all along. Now, I'm left with more questions than answers. And the worst part? I don't know if I'm ready to find out what else it's capable of. I don't know what I expected after finding the note. A part of me thought I might feel relieved. Maybe some twisted sense of clarity would hit me, and I'd finally understand what was happening in my apartment. But all I felt was a gnawing, deep-rooted terror. That thing, whatever it was, had been living here, sharing my space without my knowledge. And I'd been blissfully unaware, assuming I was just hearing things, imagining things. Now I was left to deal with the reality of it all, and I wasn't sure I could. I couldn't stop thinking about that figure. That thing that crawled out of the ventilation shaft, so twisted and unnatural, its body jerking in ways that made my skin crawl just to remember. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still here, somewhere in the walls or the vents, watching me, waiting. Maybe it had always been here, hiding in the shadows, and I had just never noticed. Maybe I had been too wrapped up in my own life, too distracted by the monotony of my existence, to see the truth. The night after finding the note, I set up the camera again. This time, I was determined to catch it in the act. I had to know what was going on. I couldn't just sit here, paralyzed by fear, waiting for it to make its move. No. I was going to take control of the situation. So, I waited. And waited. The kitchen was dark, eerily quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the building settling. My eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. Midnight. I gripped my phone, ready to hit record as soon as I saw any movement. And then, I heard it again. That scrape. That soft, unsettling noise. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't move. I stayed still, watching the camera feed. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, slowly, the camera caught something. The faintest blur, moving across the kitchen floor. I leaned in closer, my breath shallow. The blur was growing clearer. A figure, just like before. Thin, skeletal, its limbs twitching as it moved. But this time, it didn't just crawl across the floor. It paused. Right in front of the sink. My stomach churned. I could see its eyes now. Or at least, I think they were eyes. Dark, empty pits where eyes should have been. And it was staring at the camera, as if it knew I was watching. A chill ran through me, but I couldn't look away. It tilted its head, slowly, as if considering something. And then, in one quick motion, it scurried back toward the ventilation shaft. But as it disappeared, I swore I saw something else. A movement. A flicker of light, just for a second. It came from inside the shaft. Like something else was behind the thing that had crawled out. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with an unshakable sense of dread. What the hell was I dealing with? The next morning, I spent hours on the phone, trying to reach someone, anyone, who might help. But what do you say? Hey, I think there's a creepy, supernatural creature living in my apartment's ventilation system. That would get me locked up faster than you can say haunted. So, I kept my mouth shut. There was no one I could talk to about this. I was on my own. But I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine when every night felt like I was being watched, like that thing was getting closer, more desperate. I started looking for ways to solve this. I knew I had to confront it, but how? How do you fight something you can't even explain? My mind raced with possibilities. I thought about calling in an exterminator, but I couldn't imagine what kind of pest could be behind this. Maybe a plumber? But that felt just as ridiculous. I didn't even know where to start. And then, just as I was about to give up, something caught my eye. The ventilation shaft. It wasn't just a vent anymore. It was different. The edges of the metal were slightly warped, as if something had been pushing against it from the inside. And when I pressed my hand to the wall next to it, the whole thing felt wrong. I felt a wave of nausea crash over me. Something was there. Something had been there for longer than I cared to admit. I grabbed a flashlight and a wrench, determined to get a look inside. I don't know what I was expecting to find. Maybe I was hoping I'd find a rat's nest or some sort of elaborate prank. I don't know. But the truth was much worse than that. As I pried the vent cover off, I felt my pulse race. I shone the flashlight into the shaft, expecting nothing but darkness. But instead, there was something else. A cold, damp air hit me as I peered deeper into the shaft. And just like that, I saw something move, a shadow, skittering across the narrow walls. I pulled my hand back, my heart pounding. Whatever it was too close for comfort. I stepped back, shaking. And then, in a flash of panic, I remembered something else. The note. The handwriting. It's too small for both of us. What if that thing wasn't just trying to share the space? What if it wanted to replace me? What if this wasn't about living here together, it was about it taking over? And I was just the intruder. I didn't know what to do next. The air felt heavy, suffocating, as if the apartment itself was closing in around me. The thought of going to the authorities, of explaining any of this to anyone, felt impossible. No one would believe me. I was stuck in this nightmare. And the worst part? It felt like it was just getting started. As I stood there, staring at the ventilation shaft, I heard the softest sound, just a whisper, barely audible. I'll be waiting. And then, the lights flickered, plunging me into darkness. The darkness was absolute. My breath echoed in the suffocating air, but all I could hear after the flicker of the lights was the sound of my heart racing. The flashlight had gone out when the power cut, leaving me stranded in the black void of my own apartment. The silence felt oppressive, like it was pressing down on me from all sides. I'll be waiting. The words echoed in my head, and I shuddered. That voice, was it real? Was it something in my mind, or had the thing in the shaft actually spoken to me? I reached around in the dark, fumbling for my phone, trying to turn the flashlight on. My fingers were slick with sweat, and I couldn't focus. Finally, the screen lit up, casting a cold, blue glow across the kitchen. My hands shook as I aimed the phone toward the ventilation shaft. It was still there. The vent cover, still off. The dark opening stretched out before me, and for the first time, I couldn't tell if the darkness inside was just the void or something more, something that shouldn't be there. My mind raced. What had it meant by waiting? Was it planning something? Was it time for it to come out of the shaft, to fully take over? I couldn't stay in this apartment any longer, but the thought of leaving only made my stomach twist in knots. It knew about me now. It knew I was aware. I could feel it, its presence, its intentions, wrapping around me like a noose. I stumbled back from the shaft, still gripping my phone. It wasn't safe here. But where was safe? There had to be something I could do, some way to get out of this mess. Maybe I could leave. Maybe I could pack up and go, disappear, start over somewhere far away, where this thing wouldn't find me. But no matter how fast I ran, I knew one thing. I couldn't outrun the fear that had taken root in me. The faintest noise broke my thoughts, a scuffing sound, barely audible. Then, the sound of something scraping against the floor. my skin prickled. It was in the apartment. It was no longer just in the vents. It was here, in the same space as me. I froze, not daring to move. The darkness was thick with its presence. I knew it was coming. I could feel it, inching closer, its shadow stretching out toward me. The temperature in the room dropped. My breath fogged in the cold air, and I felt the unmistakable weight of something else moving around me. The kitchen sink creaked. I turned toward it, my legs like lead, unable to look away. And then, the unmistakable sound of something, or someone, sliding across the floor. I wanted to scream. But I couldn't. I couldn't make a sound. Every instinct told me to run, to hide, but I was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. Then, a shape emerged from the darkness. It wasn't just the same thin, skeletal figure I had seen on the camera. This one was different. Its movements were even more erratic, unnatural, like a broken puppet trying to move on its own. Its body twisted, contorted in a grotesque way that shouldn't have been possible. It was smiling at me. The cold, dead smile stretched across its face like a grotesque mask. It was everything I had feared. And then, it started to move toward me. I turned, stumbling backward toward the door, my heart hammering in my chest. I grabbed for the doorknob, but my hand went right through it. No. The door wasn't there. I felt my legs weaken beneath me, and I fell, crashing to the floor. My phone slipped from my grip and slid across the kitchen, the light flickering as it fell onto the cold tiles. I looked up, terrified, unable to move. The thing was getting closer, too close. My breath caught in my throat as it leaned down, and for a moment, I thought it would speak. But it didn't. Instead, it reached out, its long fingers brushing against my cheek. Its touch was cold, so cold it burned. And in that moment, I realized what it was. It wasn't just waiting for me to leave. It had been waiting for me to let it in. To allow it to become a part of my life. Its fingers pressed harder against my skin. It was suffocating me, pulling me closer to the dark void of whatever this was. The apartment felt like it was closing in, like the walls were becoming one with the thing in front of me. The line between the apartment and it, the thing in the vent, the creature from the shadows, was blurring. My head swam, and I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. There was no escape. The apartment, the walls, the air, it was all part of it now. It had consumed me. And then, just as suddenly as it had all started, everything stopped. The lights flickered back on. I blinked, disoriented. My hands trembled, but I was no longer on the floor. I was standing, perfectly still, my eyes wide. The kitchen was as it had been before, the sink, the appliances, the vent, all exactly where they should be. I looked around, my heart still pounding in my chest. The creature was gone. But it wasn't over. I could still feel it, lingering in the shadows, waiting. Watching. It was still here, inside my head, inside this place, and inside me. And I couldn't leave. Not now. Not ever. The thing had already taken me.